The forest was silent, too silent for comfort. The human named Daniel walked carefully between the tall alien trees. Their glowing leaves moved in the wind, but no sound came. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Daniel had crashed on this unknown planet 2 nights ago. His ship was broken, and he had no way to call for help. He carried only a small pack of supplies and a flashlight that flickered now and then. Every step reminded him how far he was from Earth. The night here was dangerous. He had already seen strange shapes moving in the darkness, eyes glowing like fireflies. He knew he should keep moving. But a strange feeling pulled him deeper into the forest. Something or someone was watching him. A sudden cry broke the silence. It was sharp, like a bird, but deeper. Daniel froze. His heart pounded, slowly. He turned his flashlight toward the sound. At first, he saw nothing. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped out. It was a girl, but not human. Her skin shimmered under the pale moonlight. Her body was covered in fine feathers that glowed faintly blue. Her hair was long, black with silver streaks, and her golden eyes locked on him with a piercing stare. She looked fragile, yet dangerous, like a wild creature. Daniel raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. "I don't want trouble," he whispered. The alien girl tilted her head, watching him like a hawk. Her feathers ruffled as if she was ready to fight or fly. For a moment, the two stood still, the forest around them was quiet again. Only the wind touched the trees. Daniel felt the weight of her gaze. It was not just curiosity. It was something else. Then, the ground shook. A low growl rose from the shadows. Daniel's light caught a massive beast crawling from the bushes. Its body was long, covered in scales, with jaws sharp enough to cut stone. Its eyes burned with hunger. Daniel stepped back. His mind screamed to run. But before he could move, the feathered girl leaped forward with a cry that split the night. She spread her feathered arms. They glowed like blades of light. She struck the beast across its face. The monster roared and swung its tail, smashing trees like sticks. Daniel dropped to the ground. Watching in shock, the alien girl moved fast, her feathers cutting through the air like weapons. She dodged the beast's attacks and struck again. Her movements were fierce, yet graceful, like a dance of survival. Finally, the creature howled and fled back into the darkness. The forest shook, then grew silent once more. Daniel lay frozen, his breath quick and shallow. The alien girl turned slowly to face him again. Her golden eyes glowed brighter now. She stepped closer, and Daniel could see the small scars across her arms and shoulders. She had fought many times. Before he realized she was not just some strange creature, she was a warrior. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came. The alien girl studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sudden motion, she grabbed his wrist. Her grip was strong, much stronger than he expected. She leaned close, her feathers brushing against his skin. "Stay," she whispered in a voice rough but clear. Daniel's eyes widened. She could speak, even if only one word. Before he could answer, she pulled him toward the trees, her movements urgent. Daniel stumbled after her. He looked back at the darkness where the beast had vanished, his mind filled with questions. Why did she help him? What did she want from him? They moved deeper into the glowing forest. Her hand never left his wrist. Daniel felt both fear and curiosity. She was leading him somewhere, and he had no choice but to follow. The night air grew colder. Strange lights flickered between the trees, almost like spirits watching from the shadows. Daniel's heart pounded. Every step took him further from the safety of his broken ship, deeper into her world. Finally, she stopped at a small clearing. The moonlight poured down, lighting up the feathers on her arms. She turned to him, her golden eyes catching the light. For a long moment, she just looked at him, silent. Then she raised one finger and pointed at him. Her expression was serious, almost fierce. Then she touched her chest. "You," she whispered. Then, tapping her own chest, "Me." Daniel swallowed hard. His voice shook as he said, "What do you mean?" But she only tilted her head, repeating the words slowly. "You, me." The forest seemed to grow colder. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this was not just a meeting. It was something more. Something dangerous. Something dangerous. Something that would change his life forever. Daniel could not sleep that night. Even though his body was tired and his mind heavy, the image of the feathered girl's golden eyes kept flashing in his thoughts. He sat near the small fire she had started with strange glowing stones. Her movements were silent, graceful, and quick. She acted as if she had done this many times before. The forest around them hummed softly. Creatures whispered in the distance. Daniel knew he was not safe, but somehow he felt safer beside her than he did alone. He kept looking at her feathers that shimmered in the firelight. They were sharp yet soft, beautiful yet dangerous. The girl sat across from him, watching her. Head tilted like a bird's, studying every move he made. Daniel tried to speak, "Thank you for saving me." His voice was quiet, unsure. She did not answer. She only blinked. Then pointed to the fire and then to him. Her message was clear: stay close, stay warm. For hours, they sat in silence. The only sound was the crackling fire and the far-off growls of beasts. Daniel's mind turned again and again to the word she had spoken earlier. "You, me." It echoed in his head. What did it mean? Was it a warning? A command? Or something else? When morning came, pale light filtered through the strange trees. The forest was covered in mist. Daniel woke to find the girl still there. Standing like a guardian, her feathers moved slightly in the breeze. She looked like she had not slept at all. She pointed to the path and then looked at him. He understood she wanted him to follow. They began walking together. The silence between them was heavy. But Daniel could feel something growing in that silence. A strange bond, made not of words, but of actions and looks. At one point, Daniel stumbled over a root. The girl quickly caught his arm, holding him steady. Her touch was strong, steady. Her feathers brushed his skin. And for a brief moment, he felt warmth. When he looked at her, she quickly turned her face away. Later, they came to a stream that glowed with soft blue light. Fish-like creatures swam inside, their bodies transparent like glass. Daniel knelt and drank. The water was cold, but fresh. He noticed the girl did not drink. Instead, she watched him carefully. As if checking if the water harmed him. Only after she was sure, she drank too. Daniel realized something then. She was not just leading him. She was protecting him. He had no idea why. But the thought made his heart beat faster. As the day passed, Daniel tried to speak to her again. "What's your name?" he asked. She only blinked and tilted her head. He tried again, pointing to himself. "Daniel." Then pointing at her. "You?" For a moment, she hesitated. Then she touched her chest and spoke a sound. Soft and sharp, almost like a bird call. "Karen." Daniel repeated slowly. "Karen." She gave the smallest nod. It was the first real connection between them. Hours later, the forest grew darker again. Storm clouds rolled above. Thunder cracked in the distance. Daniel felt uneasy. Karen suddenly stopped and held up her hand. She crouched low, listening. Her feathers lifted, glowing faintly blue. From the shadows, voices echoed, harsh, deep. Alien voices. Daniel's heart raced. He could not see who they were, but Karen's reaction told him it was trouble. She grabbed his arm and pulled him behind a fallen tree. They crouched there together as the voices came closer. Shapes appeared between the tree's tall figures with metal spears and glowing masks. They were hunting. Their language was rough. But Daniel caught one word repeated many times. It sounded like feathered one. His eyes widened. They were looking for her. Kieran's grip on his arm tightened. She put a finger to her lips. Warning him to stay silent, Daniel held his breath. The hunters passed close, so close he could see the mist rising from their bodies. One of them stopped, sniffing the air. Daniel's chest burned as he tried not to breathe. Finally, the hunters moved away. Their voices fading, Kieran slowly relaxed. But her golden eyes burned with fear and anger. She looked at Daniel, then whispered in her broken voice, "Danger." Daniel nodded quickly. He understood she was being hunted, and now, because he was with her, so was he, that night. When they found another place to rest, Daniel could not shake the thought from his mind. Who were those hunters? Why did they want her? What made her so important? Kieran sat beside the fire again, silent, her feathers glowing softly. Daniel watched her carefully. For the first time, he realized she was not just a mysterious creature. She was alone, hunted, and fighting to survive. Just like him, he whispered softly, "We're both in this together now." She looked at him. Tilting her head once more, her golden eyes seemed softer than before. She did not answer, but she did not look away either. As the firelight danced between them, Daniel felt the bond grow stronger. A silent bond, made not of words, but of trust and deep inside. He knew this bond was leading them toward something greater, something he could not yet understand. The night fell quickly, darker than Daniel expected. The alien forest glowed faintly with blue and green lights from plants and insects. But the shadows seemed endless. Daniel and Kieran walked until the path disappeared. Finally, she stopped. Near a wide cave hidden by hanging vines, she pointed inside. Her eyes glowed in the faint light. Daniel understood she wanted him to stay there. It was safer than sleeping out in the open. He stepped into the cave, feeling the cool air on his skin. The walls shimmered with crystals, reflecting the fire Kieran started as the flames flickered. Daniel sat down. His body was tired, but his mind was restless. He could not stop thinking about the hunters they had seen earlier. Who were they? Why were they after her? And what danger was waiting for him now that he had chosen to stay with her? Kieran sat across from him, silent as always. Her feathers reflected the firelight, making her look like she wore armor of light. Daniel tried to relax, but the silence pressed heavy on him. Finally, he spoke. "Why are they chasing you?" Kieran looked at him for a long moment, her golden eyes unreadable. Then she pointed at herself. Then at the sky, her voice came soft, almost broken. "Sacred." Daniel frowned. Sacred. That single word carried weight. He wanted to ask more. But he could see she was struggling with human words. She turned her face away. Her feathers shifted. Glowing faintly blue in the darkness, the wind outside grew louder. Thunder cracked across the alien sky. Rain began to fall, heavy and cold. Daniel looked out from the cave and saw lightning cut across the trees. It was beautiful, yet terrifying. Kieran moved closer to the entrance. Watching the storm, Daniel followed. The sky above was filled with strange colors, purple lightning, green clouds swirling like waves. "It looked like the whole planet was alive," he whispered. "Incredible." She looked at him, tilting her head. For the first time, he thought he saw a small smile on her lips. It was faint, but real. His chest tightened. It was the first moment that felt human between them. Then the ground shook. Daniel stumbled back. Kieran quickly grabbed his arm, pulling him into the cave outside. Something huge was moving through the forest. The rain splashed off its massive body as it passed between the trees. Its shadow blocked the glowing lights. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He could only see parts of it through the raina. Huge tail, scales shining like wet metal. A roar followed, shaking the ground. It was bigger than the beast from the first night, much bigger. Kieran pressed a finger to her lips. Her feathers tightened close to her body. She waited until the sound of the creature faded into the distance. Daniel's heart was pounding. He whispered, "How do you live here?" She did not answer. Instead, she moved closer to him, as if seeking warmth. Her feathers brushed against his arm. Daniel froze for a second, then slowly relaxed. It was strange this alien girl who barely spoke was beginning to feel less like a stranger and more like a protector. Hours passed. The storm raged on. Daniel lay near the fire, but he could not sleep. Karen sat close to him, her eyes watching the cave entrance. Her presence was calming, but her silence was a mystery. He could not solve. Finally, he whispered, "Kieran." She turned to him slowly. Her golden eyes met his. "Why me?" he asked. His voice shook. "Why did you save me?" She blinked. Her feathers lifted slightly. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his face. In her broken voice, she whispered, "Chosen." The word hit him harder than he expected. Chosen. He did not understand. Chosen for what? By her? By her people. By fate itself. He wanted to ask, but her eyes told him she had said all she could. The fire dimmed as the storm slowly faded outside. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, but his mind was racing. Every word she spoke carried mystery. Every gesture pulled him deeper into her world. He felt like he was standing on the edge of something life-changing. When he opened his eyes again, the cave was quiet. Kieran was still awake. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the shadows. She sat close enough that he could feel her warmth. She seemed to be guarding him, as if his life mattered more than her own. Daniel whispered softly, "You saved me. And now you protect me." His voice broke into a nervous laugh. "But I don't even know why." Karen tilted her head. Her feathers rustled like soft wind. She leaned close again and whispered one more word. "Night." Daniel froze. His eyes widened. Night, the same night he remembered when she had stopped him. The night she had pulled him close under the alien trees. What did she mean? Why that word? Before he could ask, Kieran stood and walked to the cave entrance. She looked out at the sky, her feathers glowing in the pale light of dawn breaking through the storm clouds. She turned her head slightly and whispered one last time. "You, me." Daniel felt his chest tighten. His mind spun with questions. The words were simple, but the meaning was deep. He knew then that his journey with her had only just begun. And whatever was coming would change him forever. The forest was never truly silent, even in the calmest hours. Something always stirred in the shadows. Daniel had learned this quickly. But tonight felt different. The air was heavy, and the glow of the plants seemed weaker, as if the world itself wanted to hide. Daniel sat close to the fire, watching the flames dance. Corinne was sitting across from him. Her golden eyes reflected the firelight. She had hardly moved or spoken since the storm ended. Her silence weighed on him. Finally, Daniel broke it. "Kieran, what did you mean? Chosen, night, you, me?" His voice trembled slightly. She turned her head slowly, studying him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Danger." The word made his skin crawl. He leaned closer. "Danger from who?" "From the hunters." She shook her head. Her feathers rustled softly as she leaned closer to the fire. Her lips parted, and for the first time, Daniel thought he heard more than one word. "They know," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but clear. Daniel frowned. "Who knows? What do they know?" But Kieran did not answer. Instead, she pressed a finger to her lips. Her eyes darted toward the dark forest. Daniel followed her gaze. The night seemed thicker than before. A faint sound drifted between the trees. Wise whispers, low and broken. Not human, not natural. The hairs on his neck stood up. He whispered, "What is that?" Corin stood slowly, her feathers glowing faintly. She lifted her head as if listening. The whispers grew louder, circling the clearing. Daniel's heart pounded. He grabbed a stick from the fire, holding it like a weapon. Shapes moved in, the dark shadows slipping between the trees. Daniel saw a flicker of glowing eyes. Then another. They were not beasts, not hunters, but something else. Karen's feathers lifted, glowing brighter. She spread her arms wide. Daniel saw her body, tense like a warrior ready for battle. Then she whispered in a low voice, "Spirits." Daniel froze. Spirits. He did not believe in ghosts, but the way the shadows moved, the way the whispers crawled into his ears, it felt real. The voices seemed to call his name, Daniel, Daniel. His breath shook. He turned to Corin, but her eyes were locked on the shadows. She stepped forward, her feathers glowing like a shield. The whispers grew sharper, angry, like claws scratching inside his head. Then, one shadow broke from the trees, a figure tall and twisted. Its body was smoke, but its eyes burned white. Daniel stumbled back. The fire flickered wildly. The shadow moved closer. Corin cried out in a sharp voice. Her feathers shone. Like lightning, she slashed her arms through the air, and the shadow screamed. Breaking apart like smoke in the wind, the forest shook with the sound. Daniel's ears rang. He dropped to his knees, breathing hard. More shadows pressed closer. Circling them, Corin's feathers glowed brighter. She fought them with movements that looked like both dance and battle. Her strikes sent waves of light cutting through the dark. But for every shadow she cut, more came. The whispers grew louder. Daniel pressed his hands over his ears, but the voices crawled inside his head. He heard words, broken but clear. The feathered one. The chosen. The egg? Daniel froze. His eyes widened. The egg. They knew something he did not. He turned to Corin, desperate for answers. But she was locked in battle, her face set with fierce determination. Finally, the shadows began to fade. Their whispers grew distant, and the forest grew silent once more. Karen lowered her arms slowly, her feathers dimmed. She was breathing hard, sweat shining on her skin. Daniel stood shakily. What was that? What did they mean? The egg? His voice cracked with fear and confusion. Kieran looked at him, her golden eyes heavy with secrets. She whispered, "Future." Daniel stepped closer, his heart racing. What future? What are you hiding from me? Kieran lowered her head. She touched her chest, then pointed to him. Then, with trembling hands, she drew a circle in the dirt. Inside it, she drew a shape like an egg. Daniel stared at the drawing, his stomach twisted, his voice shook. Karen, what does this mean? She lifted her gaze to his, her eyes glowing with both fear and sorrow. She whispered one word, almost too soft to hear. Life. The silence that followed was unbearable. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Life, an egg, a future. What did all of this mean for him? For her? For them both? Kieran turned her face away, refusing to say more. She stood and walked to the edge of the clearing. Watching the dark forest, Daniel sat by the fire. Staring at the dirt drawing, the whispers still echoed in his mind, for the first time since he had met her. Daniel realized something frightening. This was not just about survival. This was about destiny. And whatever destiny she carried, he was now a part of it, whether he wanted it or not. The morning came with a heavy silence. The forest looked calm, but Daniel felt the tension in the air. He kept thinking about the shadows, the whispers, and the strange word they spoke. Egg. That single word haunted him. Karen was already awake. Standing near the trees, her feathers caught the soft light of dawn. She looked restless, her golden eyes scanning the forest. Daniel could tell she had not slept at all. She moved like someone expecting danger at every moment. When Daniel tried to speak, she raised her hand and shook her head. Silence, he understood. They were not safe, not here, not anywhere, as they began walking deeper into the woods. Daniel noticed something different. The forest was not as lively as before. The glowing plants looked dimmer, and even the birds were quiet. It felt like the world itself knew what was coming. Hours passed, and they reached a clearing with strange stone pillars. Some were broken, others still stood tall, covered with alien carvings. Daniel touched one, tracing the symbols with his fingers. "What is this place?" he asked softly. Corinne hesitated. Her feathers shifted nervously. Finally, she whispered. Old Daniel waited, but she said no more. Her eyes looked heavy with memories he could not understand. Suddenly, a sound echoed across the clearing. Voices. Daniel froze. He recognized the harsh tones. It was the hunters. Kieran grabbed his arm and pulled him behind a stone pillar. Together, they crouched low, holding their breath. The hunters entered the clearing. 5 tall figures with caracetus with glowing masks and spears that pulsed with energy. Their voices were sharp, angry. Daniel could not understand their language fully. But one word repeated again and again. Feathered one. Daniel's stomach twisted. They were talking about her. About Kieran. He turned to look at her, but her golden eyes were locked on the hunters with a mix of fear and defiance. Then Daniel noticed something else. The hunters were not just searching, they were spreading word, leaving strange glowing marks on the stones. One of them spoke louder, as if making an announcement. His voice echoed through the forest. Karen's feathers tightened close to her body, her face pale. She whispered to Daniel, "Rumors." He frowned. "What kind of rumors?" She lowered her head. "Me? Human. Egg." Daniel's heart stopped. "Egg." He repeated. Karen did not look at him. Her silence was louder than any answer. The hunters finished their work and left, their voices fading into the distance. Karen stood slowly, her body trembling. Daniel stepped in front of her, his voice firm. "Tell me what they mean. Tell me about the egg." Corinne's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she touched her chest, then his. Her hands shook as she whispered. Soon, Daniel felt cold inside. Soon. The word carried both fear and promise. He wanted to press her for answers, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She was not hiding the truth out of cruelty, but out of fear. That night, they made camp near a small cliff. From there, Daniel could see the vast alien forest stretching endlessly under the stars. It should have been beautiful, but all he could think about was the hunters spreading their message. The whole world would soon know. Karen sat near the fire, staring at the flames. She looked weaker than before. Her feathers had lost some of their glow. Daniel noticed her hand resting on her stomach more than once, his mind filled with questions. He could not ask. Finally, he whispered, "Kieran, what will happen?" She turned her golden eyes toward him. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Change." The word sent a shiver through him. Change. He did not know if that meant for her, for him, or for both, as the fire burned low. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. Not beasts this time, but drums, rhythmic and heavy. Daniel's chest tightened. Someone, somewhere, was calling. Kieran stood slowly, her feathers lifting. She looked out into the dark with sharp focus. Her whisper came low, almost too soft to hear. "They come." Daniel followed her gaze and saw faint lights glowing far away in the forest. Dozens of them, moving together like a wave. His heart pounded. Whoever they were, there were many, and they were coming fast. He grabbed his pack, panic rising. "We have to run." But Kieran shook her head. Her golden eyes burned with something fierce. "No run," she whispered. face, Daniel. Stared at her, face them. Are you crazy? There are too many, but Kieran's feathers glowed brighter than before. She looked like a warrior ready for battle, her voice steady. Consequence, Daniel felt his stomach drop. He realized then that their bond, their night together, had already changed everything. The hunters knew, the spirits whispered. And now others were coming. The unseen consequence of one night was finally reaching them. And Daniel knew there was no turning back. Asterisk, the days that followed were a blur. Daniel remembered running, hiding, and surviving. But the one thing he could not forget was the moment Corin was gone. It had happened so quickly. The hunters had surrounded them, their glowing spears cutting through the dark like fire. Kieran had stood in front of him, feathers spread wide. Her golden eyes burned with fierce light. She had whispered only one word, live. And then she was gone. Daniel had searched for her. He had shouted her name again and again, his voice echoing in the alien forest, but no answer ever came. All he found were footprints fading into the mud, and the silence of the night swallowing her presence. 30 days passed, 30 long, heavy days. Daniel had survived alone. His body was tired, his heart even more. He hunted small creatures, drank from glowing streams, and hid from shadows that still whispered his name. Every night he thought about her, about the words she had spoken, about the drawings she had made of the egg. He told himself he had imagined that it was just his mind breaking under the weight of loneliness. But deep inside, he knew it was real. Something had changed that night between them, and the world itself seemed to know it. On the 30th night, the forest grew restless. The wind howled, the glowing leaves trembled. Daniel sat near his small fire, exhausted. His eyes were half closed when he heard it, a soft cry, high and sharp. Like the first time he had ever heard her voice, his heart leaped. He turned toward the trees. At first, he thought it was just a memory, a dream. But then, through the shadows, a figure appeared. It was her Karen. She looked thinner, weaker. Her feathers dimmed, her steps heavy, but her golden eyes still burned with light. Daniel rushed toward her, his voice breaking. Kieran. She stumbled, nearly falling. Daniel caught her in his arms. She was warm, but trembling. Her breath came heavy. She whispered, Daniel. His name sounded broken on her lips, but it filled him with fire. Then he saw it, in her arms, wrapped carefully in layers of glowing feathers, was something strange, something round, pulsing faintly with light. His breath caught in his throat. What is that? Kieran lifted her head, her golden eyes soft now, filled with both pride and fear. She whispered one word. Egg. Daniel froze. The world seemed to stop moving. He stared at the glowing shape. His voice cracked. An egg. Yours? Kieran shook her head slowly. Her trembling hand reached out and touched his chest. Then she pressed the egg gently against him. Her whisper came clear. Ours. Daniel's knees felt weak. His mind spun. He shook his head. That's not possible. I'm human. He could not finish. His voice broke. The egg glowed brighter in his arms. Karen leaned close, her forehead touching his. Life, she whispered. New life. Her body shook as if the weight of carrying it had drained her soul. Daniel wrapped his arms around both her and the egg, his heart racing. Memories of the hunters and the whispers of the shadows filled his mind. They had spoken of the feathered one, the human, the egg. They had known this would happen. They had feared it. He realized now why they were chasing her, why the spirits whispered. This egg was not just a child, it was a sign. Daniel whispered, Corin, what will happen now? Her golden eyes closed halfway, her voice weak. Change. Future. He held her tighter, refusing to let her fall. The egg pulsed with light. Warm against his chest, he felt its heartbeat, steady and strong. His whole body shook. This was no dream. This was real. Kieran pulled back slightly, her eyes filled with tears he had never thought she could shed. She whispered, "Protect," and placed her hands over his, holding the egg. Her feathers glowed faintly once more, wrapping around them like a shield. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "I'll protect it. I'll protect you." His words cracked, but they were true. For the first time, he felt something larger than himself. A purpose. The forest around them stirred. Voices echoed in the distance. The hunters, they were still searching. They would never stop. Daniel looked at the glowing egg. Then at Kieran. He knew the fight was not over. It was only beginning that night, under the alien sky. Daniel held Kieran and the egg close, his heart full of fear, but also full of something else, hope. For 30 days he had been lost, alone, but now he carried something that could change. Everything. The return of the feathered girl was not just a reunion. It was a gift, a responsibility, and a warning. And Daniel knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The fire burned low. Casting faint light across the cave walls, Daniel sat with the egg in his arms. Its glow pulsed slowly. Like a second heartbeat against his chest, Kieran rested. Beside him, her body weak, but her golden eyes watching him closely. For the first time in weeks, Daniel did not feel completely alone. He felt the weight of something greater, heavier than survival. This was not just his life anymore. It was theirs. Together, outside, the forest whispered with night sounds. But Daniel heard more than just insects and birds. In the distance, drums echoed faintly. The hunters were still searching. He knew they would not stop, not until they took the egg. Kieran's voice came weak but steady. "Danger." Her feathers trembled as she looked toward the forest. Daniel nodded. His grip on the egg tightened. "Then we fight, or we run, but I won't let them take this." Kieran touched his chest, her whisper softer now, "Not just fight. Protect." Daniel stared at her, his throat tight. Protect. The word carried weight, heavier than any promise he had ever made. The days that followed blurred together. Daniel learned to move carefully, to hide his tracks, to cover the glow of the egg with Kieran's feathers. He hunted food, built fires that gave no smoke, and carried both Kieran and the egg when she grew too weak. Every night, he felt the warmth of the egg. He could almost imagine something alive inside, something waiting. His fear battled with awe. What could hatch from it? Would it even survive? Would it be human, alien, or something else? Kieran seemed to sense his thoughts. One night, she whispered, "Future." Daniel looked at her, his voice low. "Our future?" She nodded slowly, her golden eyes soft. "Yes, ours." The word shook him to his core. He had never thought of himself as part of something this big. He was just a man, stranded far from home. Yet now, he held a life that could change not just him, but maybe the galaxy. One evening, as they crossed an open ridge, Daniel saw lights below. Villagers, aliens who looked different from Kieran, but shared the same feathered traits, were gathered around fires, their eyes turned upward. They had seen him. Panic surged in his chest. Kieran grabbed his arm. Her feathers glowed faintly. She whispered, "Wait." Her tone firm. Daniel froze. His instinct told him to run. But her eyes told him something else. Slowly, the villagers approached. Their feathers shimmered in the night. Some carried weapons, but none raised them. Instead, they stopped a few steps away, staring at the glowing bundle in Daniel's arms. Whispers spread among them, their eyes wide with awe and fear. Daniel heard the words, repeated again and again. Feathered one. Human. Egg. Kieran stood tall despite her weakness. She spread her arms, her golden eyes blazing in the firelight. She pointed at Daniel. then at the egg. Her voice cracked but strong hours. The villagers gasped. Some dropped to their knees. Others bowed their heads. Daniel stared in shock. He had no idea what was happening, but it was clear the egg was not just important to her. It was sacred to all of them. An elder stepped forward, his feathers white with age, his eyes fixed on Daniel. In a deep voice, he spoke words Daniel could not understand fully, but Karen translated with a whisper. Unity. Daniel's heart pounded. Unity. That was what they saw. A bond between two species that had never been meant to meet. A life born from that bond. A future that could not be undone. The villagers sang that night, a low, haunting song that echoed through the forest. Daniel sat with Corin, the egg between them, for the first time. He did not feel hunted. He felt chosen, but even in that peace, he knew danger had not vanished. The hunters were still out there, the shadows still whispered, and one day they would come for the egg. Kieran leaned against him, her feathers brushing his arm. Her whisper was soft but filled with fire. Protect, promise. Daniel closed his eyes. Holding her hand tightly, I promise, he said, his voice breaking. The egg glowed brighter, pulsing with life. Daniel felt its warmth spread through him, filling the emptiness that had once consumed his soul. He no longer thought only of survival. He thought of tomorrow, of the child that would come, of the bond that tied him forever to her. The night stretched long. The villagers guarded them. The fire burned steady. Daniel looked at Corin and then at the egg, his heart full of fear, hope, and something new love. He whispered to himself, almost afraid of the words, "This will change everything." And deep inside, he knew it was true. The egg was not just a gift. It was a beginning that no force in the galaxy could stop.